Hello everybody. Another week has passed and once again a lot to talk about. We'll start with what happened last Friday, the publication of the employment figures for the United States, the famous non-farm payrolls, which came up much better than most expected. So the actual result was 274,000 against an expected number of 160,000. So 234,000 new jobs were created in the US during the month of June. This is good news for the economy. It's not so good news for the ones that were expecting a rate cut in July. Many expected that with the economy showing signs of strength and employment numbers being so good, it would make it less likely for the FOMC to announce a cut in the American interest rates at their July meeting. However, that all changed yesterday when Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, went for his usual testimony in front of Congress. It started with a pre-written statement that he delivered in the House, and during that statement, he was actually very, very dovish. So he mentioned a number of risks for the American economy. He talked specifically about the growth in trade tensions between the US and China and the threat they represent for the growth of the economy. He also mentioned inflation, which remains stubbornly below the symmetric target of 2%, and therefore he laid the ground unequivocally for a rate cut to be announced at the end of this month of July. So that was pretty much it. It's interesting that Jerome Powell managed to out-dovish the FOMC. So yesterday, following his initial statement at the House of Congress in the US, we've also had the publication of the last FOMC minutes. And even the more dovish members of that committee were out-dovished by Jerome Powell. So very interesting, for sure, rate cut in July. Consequence of this, dollar just lost massively against all other currencies, so big losses for the dollar, and of course, with investors looking for yield elsewhere, they turned into stocks, and the S&P yesterday, for the first time ever, passed through the barrier of 3,000 points. So exciting times for stocks traders. Elsewhere, we have in Europe a lot of talk about the next head of the ECB. As we all know, Mario Draghi is on his way out after 8 years, a mandate during which he didn't cut interest rates a single time. Extraordinary. And in the pipeline, due to replace him, is Christine Lagarde. Of course, Lagarde is not an economist, she's a politician, and perhaps that's exactly what we need, because many say that the euro will only survive with greater fiscal solidarity and a number of other measures that require the agreement of all states. And who else can do that? A politician, of course, someone who can influence and persuade other politicians. Elsewhere, we've had an interesting situation in Turkey with President Erdogan firing the head of the central bank because he wanted to do something against the will of President Erdogan, which is not very good. And the result is that the Turkish lira, the roller coaster Turkish lira, once again came crashing down. Result of all this, well, a lot of tension, some uncertainty. So what's going on? Oil is going up because of tension in Iran, of course, and a storm that is brewing in the Gulf of Mexico. This is a real storm, not a metaphorical one, and therefore crude above $59. Finally, hardly surprising that with all this uncertainty, gold has once again broken the $1,400 barrier as people seek refuge in assets that are perceived as secure. So this is all for this week, and I will see you again soon.